Hello, everybody, and welcome to Fun with Scratch. Today, in our 11th episode, we're going to use what we've learned in the past 10 episodes to make a Space Invaders game. So, if you've never seen Space Invaders, it's a very simple early game in which you have a spaceship that has to shoot down aliens before they come and attack it. So we are going to learn how to program that today. It's gonna take a little bit of time, and we're gonna have to divide it into multiple parts, probably 2 videos. But we're going to walk you through the whole process. So first off, we've got a new project. I'm gonna name it Space Invaders Game. And now we want to think a little bit. So, what are the different parts of the Space Invaders game? We have the rocket ship, for one. So, that has to move across the bottom of the screen here, and it has to be able to fire lasers. So, that's the second part. And then also, we have to have our aliens coming down from the top of the screen. So, that's the third part. So if we think of it in 3 distinct parts, we can work through it one by one and make it easier to break down the problem. So let's start off. Let's just get a sprite for our rocket ship and see if we can get it to fire some lasers. So I'm going to edit this first sprite, go to costumes, see if we can get a rocket ship costume. Let's see. Rocket ship. I like this one. We'll do that. Alright. So this can be our rocket ship. Oops. Don't do that. And that will go across the bottom of the screen and fire our little lasers. And probably don't need these costumes, so we can just leave it like that. So this is our rocket ship. First, we need to make it such that we can move it back and forth across the screen using the arrow keys.
There's one important thing that we need to talk about at this point so that you can understand how we're going to program this. The Scratch stage that we've been working with for this entire series is something called a coordinate grid. So there's 4 coordinates, almost 4 different slices of this square, and there's an up and down direction, which is the y-axis, and a right to left direction, which is the x-axis. So the center is 0x, 0y. Positive y values are going to be up in the upper half. Negative y values are going to be in the lower half. And positive x values are going to be on the right side. Negative x values are going to be on the left side. So every spot on the stage can be described using an x coordinate and a y coordinate. If we had a spot somewhere in this upper right hand side, then it would have a positive x coordinate and a positive y coordinate. So when we talk about movement, like moving to the right, really what we're doing is we're changing the x coordinate of a sprite. And if we're talking about going up and down, we'd be changing the y coordinate. So going up would be increasing it, going down would be decreasing it. Remember this as we talk about the position and movement of sprites during this game. Now let's get back to programming.
So let's start. And when flag clicked, we want it to go down to the bottom of the screen. So go to y, let's try negative 100. See what that does. All right, and we probably want it a little bit lower, so we'll do maybe negative 140. See how that looks. All right, that's pretty good. Now we also, this looks pretty big, so let's maybe shrink it down. So say set size to 25%. Try that. Okay, that's a little small. Go a little bigger, 35%. A little bigger, we'll do 50%. All right. Yeah, so that's pretty good. We could have that move across. I'm actually just gonna go back down 40%. But you just fiddle with it a little bit. And now we want it to be able to move across back and forth on the screen. So we could do when a certain button is clicked. So like when right arrow is clicked, we move to the right, or when left arrow is clicked. But I think a better way to do it is to put it in a forever loop, so that it'll just be in one kind of cohesive thing here. So we want, first off, an if statement. So if we have key right arrow pressed, then we're going to change our x by 10. So let's just try that. If we do this, then we should be able to click the right arrow and I'll move it. But now we also need to do the same thing here. Saves a little time. We can take this out and then right click and then hit duplicate. And then all we need to do is now do left arrow, and then do negative 10. Now we should be able to move our rocket back and forth using the arrow keys. But it's possible someone would want to use WASD instead. So something we can do, use this OR operator. What this does is it allows us to set multiple conditions, or essentially multiple different keys to be able to do the same thing. So now we can do left arrow, duplicate it, and so we can say left arrow key or the A button. And then get rid of that. We can duplicate this whole thing and say instead right arrow or the D button. So now you can choose whether you want to use the arrow keys or A and D to move it. So that looks pretty good. We've got our spaceship. We can move back and forth. And that's pretty much all of that our spaceship needs to do. That was nice and simple. We can change that around a little later if we want. But now let's turn our attention to the lasers that it has to shoot. So the way that we're going to do this is we're going to make another sprite for our lasers. Actually, no, we should probably draw it, paint it. You could do a line, maybe. That. Actually, that's going to be hard to see. Let's Control Z, undo that. I'm going to make a circle. I'm going to make it filled with red, outline black. So when you're making an oval like this, if you just try and go by hand, it's difficult. But if you hit Control, Shift. Okay, if you press down the Shift key, it'll make sure that it stays as a circle. So draw out your oval, but click down the Shift key so that no matter how you move it, it stays as a circle. Now I'm gonna just drag that to the center there, and that's a pretty big laser. So maybe we want to shrink it down a little bit, drag it in that corner, back to the center. That's still pretty big, but we can always change the size of it later. So that's all right. We'll go back now. For this guy, what we want to do is we want to use the clone option. So there's this functionality, where is it? To create a clone. And what this means is if we wanted to have 50 different lasers on the screen all at the same time, we wouldn't need 50 different sprites. We could just have 50 different clones of this one sprite. So let's say every time that there's a space, or we can say spacebar. So spacebar will be our button to shoot a laser. So we'll go back and say if space key pressed. And if we want, we can go back and put some OR blocks such that it could be like space key or maybe the W or maybe the up arrow. But we can just do that later. We can say create clone of, and then right now it says myself, but we don't want another clone of the spaceship. We want another clone of the laser. So we're going to do sprite 2. It's actually here. Let's really quick rename these sprites so it's a little easier for us to tell what we're talking about. So we'll call this rocket ship, and then so you can just type in this sprite bar rocket ship, hit enter. Then we're going to click back over here, same thing, except we're going to go with backspace and then type laser. Alright, we're almost done here. So, rocket ship. Every time that we press spacebar, we're going to create a clone of this laser. And that way, we can click the spacebar many, many, many times and shoot a lot of different lasers. So, now we'll use this block when I start as clone. So every time we press space, this script is going to run. What we want it to do, right, is we want to shoot the laser. It goes from the spaceship up until it goes out of the frame, and then we want it to disappear. So how about, let's say, first, probably shrink it down a little bit. It's still pretty big. So we'll do 50. Also then, what we want it to do is go to the X position and the Y position of the rocket ship, right? Because if the rocket ship is in the middle of the screen here, we don't want the laser to fire out over here. So we're going to say go to, where is that? Go to X, and then for that, we're going to have to make a variable. Because this rocket ship, right, we don't know where it is, and it's constantly changing its position. So what we're going to do is create a variable, and we're going to call it, make a variable, rocket X position. And then, should be for all sprites. And we're going to say set rocket X position to the X position of the rocket. And we only need to do this for the X because the Y is going to stay the same. And then we can also click off. We don't need to see what it is. So if we click that, then that'll disappear up there, because we don't really need to see that right now. So rocket X position, we go back here. We want to go to the X position is going to be rocket X position. And the Y position, it's always going to be the same because the position of the rocket always stays the same, negative 140. So we do that, Y, negative 140. Now we want it to move up to the end of the screen and then disappear. So we'll use a while loop, repeat until the Y position of the laser, right, is at the top of the screen. So Y position equals, I believe the top is 180. So if we do that, repeat until Y position equals 180, then we change Y by 10, and then once we're at the top of the screen, we go delete this clone. Now, we run this program, we should be able to press space and shoot some lasers out to the top of the screen. So there's still some things we need to fix with this, but I think that's pretty good for this first video. So we will finish this up in part 2, but you can already see we've already made a rocket ship that can go back and forth and shoot lasers. And we've used variables, we've used loops, we've used conditional if statements, and all types of different things that we've studied so far. So you can see that once you learn all the pieces, you can use it to build a really cool game. Alright, we will see you in the next video.